Please come in. You're right on time. The door only opens when the clock strikes midnight. Georgia and Hannah are preparing to broadcast from the belfry. Just like this old bell tower, they have many stories to tell. Some old and some new. Follow me up these stairs, but mind your step. Ah, they're waiting for you.
Man, this is just going to be a bunch of... No, this isn't going to be as sad as my next episode, that's for sure.
Hell yeah.
So we had a fun little episode last week
Mm-hmm.
about...
You mean 5 minutes ago?
You mean 2 seconds ago? About witch trials in Europe. I'm going to talk about something a little bit different, just south of that continent.
It feels like you're talking like this, which
It
is kind of
does.
funny. It doesn't sound weird. It's just the way that like you look. It's like,
Oh, I see.
let's get sensual. It's Delilah.
This is bright, so
Lay it on me.
I'm laying it. In the 1990s, there was actually a growing interest in comparing African witchcraft with the witch craze in medieval Europe and post-medieval Europe that you just talked about. Don't really know why, but I think I can kind of guess why. It's because anthropologists were trying to move away from that European American idea of anthropologizing themselves and indigenous cultures in their continent. And they were like, you know what? We haven't done ethnographies of these people in a while. Let's go check some stuff out. And so people started studying specifically witchcraft in Eastern Africa, mostly because in Eastern Africa, that's where a lot of the melding between Christianity and like the shamanistic African religions and cultural practices kind of came together. In Western Africa, not as much, but I'll get to that in a minute. I don't know if you mentioned it, but the word witch is derived from the Old English noun. Do you know it?
No.
Wicca.
Oh, well, yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
Meaning sorcery. And then the verb, I think it's Wiccan. It's Wiccian, which is
dumb.
Wiccan, which refers
Wiccan.
to like casting a spell. That's the verb.
Uh-huh.
The original European concept of witchcraft presupposed sorcery. Sorcery refers to an amalgam of beliefs and practices aimed at manipulating nature for the benefit of the practitioner or his or her client. So I think I interpret this as being like witches can perform sorcery as well as like witchcraft. They're more or less one and the same. They're just the words came about later on for sorcery.
Yeah.
Classic witchcrafts insinuates sort of practicing black magic by means of extraordinary acts or feats. Later on, interpreted as an explicit rejection of the Christian God. Blah, blah, blah. Lame. Anthropologist E. Evans Pritchard later described the difference between witchcraft and sorcery in that one is an inherent quality, witchcraft, and the other is an acquired craft through practice. And this is actually called the Azande model, though it was only ever meant to categorize the Azande culture of Africa, their witchcraft and sorcery, never anybody else's. But anthropologists took that model and then tried to apply it to other like West African cultures.
And then someone else took it and applied it to D&D.
Yes.
Although it You'd be warlock and sorcerer and wizard.
Yes. There's another sort of hypothesis. Margaret Murray came up with the witch cult hypothesis in Europe or in Western Europe about how essentially if you are a witch, you're a part of the cult and you participate in these cult-like practices and you're devoted to, I believe it's like a grand master. And
was she the one who also theorized that Joan of Arc was also actually burned as a witch?
I don't know, but I can look it up really quick. Yes.
And everyone was like, that's stupid.
Yes. She believed, here, let me just read the whole paragraph. Murray asserted that a pre-Christian fertility-based religion had survived the Christianization process in Britain, although it came to be, quote, practiced only in certain places and among certain classes of the community, unquote. She believed that folkloric stories of fairies in Britain were based on a surviving race of dwarfs who continued to live on the island up until the early modern period. She asserted that this race followed the same pagan religion as the witches, which there was this group, I think it's like the Dianic group, thus explaining the folkloric connection between the two. In the appendices to this book, she alleged that Joan of Arc and
Gilles de Rais,
thank you, were members of the witch cult and were executed for it.
We'll talk about Gilles de Rais in the future. He's known as the real life Bluebeard.
Oh, and that's
I'm
that's
really
true.
excited to talk about him.
It is the Dianic cult, by the way. I had to go. Anyway, Margaret Murray thought of this witch cult hypothesis and that witches in Europe or who practiced this as a religion were doing it as like cult evil like things, very animistic, shamanistic crap. Right?
Crap.
So, precursor. Africa consists of 54 countries and 4 territories as of right now, which operates under the African Union, or is a continental union consisting of 55 member states. Through surveys and censuses, many people identify themselves with the major religions: Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, small number, Judaism.
Can I tell you an anecdote that I heard while I was waiting for the bus the other day?
Oh my God.
Some guy was...
Can't even let me finish my sentence.
Oh, you paused, so okay, keep going.
No, it's fine. Go ahead.
Oh, this guy was just like flipping absolute shit that Africa was the continent and not the country.
They have more countries than we have states, and it's a absolutely massive continent.
I know.
It's huge.
I know. And like that South Africa was a country within the continent of Africa.
Yes, it is.
And he was just like, what?
Oh my God, what an idiot.
Anyway, kids these days.
So many people identify themselves with the major religions mostly as a result of colonization and globalization. Thanks, colonizers.
Like we just discussed, yes.
In saying that, we literally just said that Africa is huge. They have more countries than we have states. There's going to be a wide variety of diverse cultural practices that may or may not align with what we know as witchcraft, or what a lot of Christians or whatever may have said, yeah, that's witchcraft. Oh yeah, they're trying to cause harm to people by burning some herbs. That's crazy. Which, by the way, have they ever heard of incense?
Incense used in Catholic Mass?
Yes.
Incense brought by the 3 wise men to gift to the baby Jesus?
Yes, baby Jesus. I believe that I actually read this quote to you, or at least part of it already. So in reading an article published in 1995, so this was 19 years ago, the author discusses, it has been established that all pre-scientific societies resorted to supernatural explanations of causation.
That's 29 years ago.
29 years ago. Oh my God, you're so right. Anyway, I don't know how to do math.
I was like, girl, you weren't even born then and you're older than 19.
Hell no. All pre-scientific societies resorted to supernatural explanations of causation. The preeminence of the occult. They are to be seen as explanatory systems for coping with the unknown. It helps in differentiating between the virtuous and antisocial, and witchcraft beliefs are difficult to destroy, for they form a system which can absorb and explain many failures and apparently contradictory evidences.
Mm-hmm.
While,
like infant death mortality rates.
Yeah. So while the beginning of this kind of edited paragraph, I cut out some like random factoids that they had dropped in, or examples, excuse me. They started out saying that like all pre-scientific societies had supernatural explanations, but then they go on to explain that like, yeah, it's because they needed to come up with reasons for things. I guess you could say that science might also be a supernatural explanation for things.
Yeah.
If it's something that we technically created in our own head, these words, these phrases and meanings, we're just doing the same thing.
It's that like science is magic, we just don't understand yet. Or magic is science, we just don't understand yet.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretend I said it right the first time.
You said it to me right the other day when
I know.
When I gave you that quote. So it is assumed likely to have witchcraft is assumed to have likely become more important to a society as it became more sedentary, like as a group kind of stopped, became more localized and permanent within a landscape, because they had more need for an explanation for the difficulties that they faced, like drought or famine or infant mortality, disease, whatever. Because while they may have experienced similar hardships while being more nomadic, usually the more nomadic societies didn't have as many people. So they were able to come up with other explanations. At least with the Ibibio of southeastern Nigeria, what's the word I'm looking for? Not affluence, the spread, the something fluence. The influence of witchcraft, sure, became more popular during European colonization and slave trade as a result of facing the difficulties and struggles of experiencing white people.
Yeah.
Dealing with them. Because witchcraft has historically in African countries has been used to negate problems, get rid of the white people. Witchcraft was popularized with the people of Old Calabar in southern Nigeria. The Ibibio was southeastern Nigeria. During a pre-colonial economic expansion, they used witchcraft as a method of coping with changing traditions in societal organization. So status was changing, and so people started implementing witchcraft as part of like the higher social status. Say like, yes, we will take care of you. Everything's fine.
Yeah.
But it's generally...
we have the powers to do so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's assumed to have become a thing across Africa independently between cultures, because as we should all know and acknowledge, in case anyone thought otherwise, Africa is not a monolith and there is no African culture, quotes. Since Europeans colonized much of the African continent, the East and the West, the idea of, quote, evil witchcraft has been presumed to be much more prevalent than it actually is or has been. To some groups, such as the Talensi, in Western Africa, witchcraft is practically non-existent and comes from myth. Like people just make it up. The Ghanaian Akan and Nigerian Igbo also don't really consider witchcraft as something to fear or even consider as a problem. It would be, I'm trying to think of what it would be akin to for us. I was gonna say like, oh, it's like the Ku Klux Klan, but the Ku Klux Klan was very much a problem for a while. So
Yeah.
never mind.
And something to actually be feared.
Absolutely, yes. Absolutely.
The Illuminati.
Yeah.
Well, I think
Yeah.
QAnon is also afraid of the Illuminati, but
Well, yeah. The Akan and Igbo did recognize that like witchcraft was a thing and those practices were happening, but they were like, no biggie. It's just a part of what it is. They're just doing what they do. So very much depending on who you talk to, it could be like an important part of one's, excuse me, it could be an important part of one's religion in terms of distinguishing the evil or abomination side of things, like that's what witchcraft is, or these are also just our practices. Both pre and post colonial witchcraft involved using, apparently, a range of supernatural powers or magic, all the way from like healing injuries and disease to causing injury and disease, two kind of sides of the spectrum. And there are a few different names for practicing witchcraft, which I will mention, that resulted from these like post-colonial syntheses of the shamanism and Christianity. So you've probably heard of Vodun, right? Or Haitian voodoo.
Oh, right. Okay.
That's what sort of
No, we
came
never talked
over.
about
No, totally not. That's really what sort of took over the Caribbean and a significant portion of Latin America. But there was also the Ifa slash Orisha. There's
I've heard of that
also
too, yeah.
Santeria. I think that's how you say it.
Santeria, yeah.
Santeria. There's like a little eye over the, or a little over the eye.
Like the Sublime song.
Yeah. Oh my God, I forgot about that. Both sort of originating from Yoruban slash Catholic mixture. And then there's also hoodoo, which we know is created as a result of the Great Migration, aka the transatlantic slave trade in the southern United States and Mexico.
I always interpreted that as like more actual folk magic as well.
Hoodoo?
Yeah.
Yes.
Which I guess like could all kind of technically be considered folk magic.
I believe, yeah, a lot of it is. Yeah. Because hoodoo came about as a result of all of these people talking about their ancestral beliefs rather than their own actual beliefs. Because in being born in the United States, they had lost that sense of cultural tradition. They had to adapt to the situation that they were put in. And so they took what they knew from their parents and their grandparents and transformed it into something that dealt with that situation that they were experiencing. It helped them deal with that difficulty, just like others may have used witchcraft to deal with famine or infant mortality. Yeah. I think it's just another name for like the synthesis of different shamanistic things coming together. Yeah.
Right.
I do think that hoodoo, there's a lot more chanting though.
Yeah. There's all of these, I think they do have that like, it's like a Venn diagram kind of where like they all overlap with each other.
Yeah, because there's been so much forced migration and emigration that and just meshing of culture Yeah. It's just a big old melting pot
Yeah.
because of
Melting
colonization.
pot.
We love
Yay.
colonizers. Yay. They ruin everything. But I mean, before that, I'll get into this a little bit later, but before that there were even like witch hunts happening before colonizers arrived. Because there's always going to be somebody that's like, you know, I don't think that this is right, because they perceive that the witch is causing harm or injury or disease or whatever. And
Yeah.
I digress. Like any old witchcraft we may be familiar with in the year of our Lord 2024, rituals or spells can involve, but is not limited to, and definitely doesn't require, herbalism, chanting, dancing, sacrifice, creating and or destroying charms or shrines, divining or fortune telling, fortune,
Fortune.
fortune telling, and potion making.
Yeah.
I would like to read a bit of what I read about the Azande. I mentioned the Azande model earlier. This is a specific cultural group that people have sort of forced
that exists in all of Africa.
Yes, they describe this describes all of Africa. Just to give you a little tidbit on, at least that's what this world did with witchcraft.
Okay.
In Azande society, witchcraft is perceived as a potent force used to harm individuals, and it permeates every aspect of their lives. They believe that witchcraft is hereditary and can only be passed from parent to child of the same gender. This psychic power is believed to work at close range and can manipulate nature to cause harm, such as using animals or collapsing structures. The Azande do not attribute human errors like mistakes in farming or moral crimes like lying to witchcraft. Instead, they primarily associate it with negative occurrences such as disease and death. A witch will only use their powers against someone they dislike, mood, with the process involving the transfer of the victim's soul to a group of witches. While the victim's relatives can prepare a defense, they must seek advice from an oracle before retaliating. And the oracle is supposed to be, it's like oracle healer person.
Like a good magic.
From so many things I read, there's always another magic user who has to like step in and point out this witch and heal the afflicted person of their trouble. It is so common. Like, if they're in a witch hunt, if there is a witch, there is a hunter. Always. There's you can't just have one.
Yeah.
Two sides, same coin. And it's unfortunately always men.
Yeah.
Who are the oracles or the witch hunters.
Ugh.
So the Azande believe that witchcraft is hereditary. It's passed from parent to child of the same gender. Whereas the Maka believe that witchcraft comes from inside a person rather than genetically, and it's passed down through being born. It's something that's just inherent and it has to be sort of realized. So that's just a couple.
That's delightful.
Different. I know.
I like that one.
It's kind of like realizing you're the avatar. It's just in you.
Or just like realizing that you have potential as a human being and that you're capable of doing things.
Sure.
Like realizing yourself.
So more recently, indigenous African scholars are becoming more curious as to how European, or generally Western scholars, came up with the words animism, idolatry, paganism, heathenism, magic, and fetishism in relation to African societies when they are so different from their equivalent in Europe, and how they were able to describe and define the various African religions that resulted from colonization. Why would they not use the African words for things? Why would they not speak to the Igbo and say, hey, how would you describe what came about as a result of us killing a lot of you?
That would make too much sense.
Yes. Of course, many religious practices or acts of witchcraft can be found in Latin America and the southern United States. I mentioned before, it's sort of like the melting pot. I found this fun word, syncretism.
Oh.
Never heard that before. Let me hit you with the definition.
I feel like
An amalgamation or attempted amalgamation of different religions, cultures, or schools of thought. The merging of different inflectional varieties of a word during the development of a language. So it's like a couple things. So resulting from colonization, like the witch hunting and the forceful suppression of indigenous religion and cultural traditions, it didn't destroy witchcraft, it just transformed. We love to see it.
Yeah. You cannot destroy this.
Yes. So obviously, colonizers with their Christian or Islamic ideals and practices were already very highly superstitious of witches, but it's not like superstition didn't exist already. The accusations and consequences just changed as the white Europeans took over the governments and economies and sort of infiltrated culture because they were obviously going to use their judicial system or whatever.
What's better?
What's better? Well,
no, the like white colonial judicial systems are just better.
Oh, you said, well, it's better.
Yeah.
I mean,
I'm being sarcastic.
Sometimes with a lot of stuff like this, well, in the 18th and 19th centuries in Africa, when a lot of like witch trials were happening, it was apparently a lot better than what was happening prior to colonization. So like while we want to say like, oh yeah, the Europeans, yeah, it's probably going to be really bad, it comparatively was.
Okay.
Yeah. Which I'll,
get into.
I sorry, I started out this sentence like in the middle of a sentence, so I'm just gonna skip that.
LOL.
LOL. So some examples of witch trials or equivalents. In 1957, the South African Parliament passed an act of witchcraft suppression, which prohibits various activities related to witchcraft, witch smelling,
what?
or witch hunting, like investigating, seeking out witches.
Witch smelling?
Yes.
Just.
Yeah. That's really how you find witches, I think. It basically says that if you cause disease, injury, or damage to another person by a supernatural or magical means, accuse yourself or others of supernatural powers, witchcraft, or sorcery, you could be fined hundreds of thousands of South African rands and sentenced for up to 10 years in prison.
Hot diggity.
And if someone is killed as a result of these supernatural magical means, you could get up to 20 years in prison. There's also,
so this is
South
for
Africa.
like if someone used magic to harm someone else, that's 20 years in prison. Okay.
Yes. If you wrongfully accuse someone of that, or you are accused of, or if there's like any witch hunting at all, then it goes to trial and bitch is gonna go to prison.
Oh, so like Charlemagne. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, also, I had it backwards.
No, you're good. Soliciting a witch doctor, saying that you know about witchcraft and you're giving other people advice about it, or taking any witch's advice and acting on it will get you up to 5 years in prison with a fine.
Oh, well.
Also, pretending to use supernatural powers or magic can get you up to 2 years in prison. And this also includes telling fortunes.
Oh boy, we're going to talk about this in my next episode.
This, what is this called? The Witchcraft Suppression Act is still enforced to this day.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. In pre-colonial Ghana, witch hunting involved something called corpse carrying. Doesn't that sound familiar?
Ooh.
Wherein the body of a dead person who died through witchcraft or magical supernatural means being carried would direct the people carrying it to the person responsible for their death. So that person could then be summarily executed or dealt with.
Yeah.
So the accused could be
I can see that leading to horrible, horrible places.
Yes. The accused could be executed, exiled, or cleansed at a shrine. This is in Ghana, which typically involved like physical and mental assault and debilitation. When the British colonized Ghana in the 1870s, they reserved the right to fair trials and capital punishment, saying, you can't execute anymore. It's got to be us for witchcraft, which it became increasingly less common over the following decades, wherein in 1930, there was a law passed which favored curing through confession to an oracle, priest, pastor person. So it was, I believe it was through community confession, like, what's it called? Intervention. Yeah.
So you
So
could
like
die.
mental torture.
Right. So
Rather
you
than
could
physical.
die, and then I could walk your corpse to someone I don't like.
Yeah.
And say, you killed my rotten soldier here.
Yeah.
They take him to a temple and torture him and execute him.
Yeah. Corpse carrying was outlawed when Ghana was colonized, by the way.
So, but like,
but the pointing of the finger was still
very
I'm
I don't like
assuming
you, so I'm going to make this happen.
a
Yeah.
lot of it must have also been driven by gossip, because
Right.
if you maybe heard something about like, oh yeah, I heard that she was so terrible to this dude, like she rejected him, oh, she probably did it, she probably killed him.
So this is one instance where the colonial justice system was actually an improvement.
Yes, because then people weren't being executed.
Yeah. Damn.
And then other countries and territories, such as in the Democratic Republic of Congo, which was called something else, as like colonization spread southward, they introduced laws that either formally recognized witchcraft or magical practices and outlawed witch hunts as a result. Although in May of 2020, over a dozen people, a majority women, were set ablaze in southern Nigeria as a result of witch persecution. The accuser, Thomas Obi Tawo, was a corrupt local government official, shocker, who had been apparently going through like a series of power trips in his position of government and struggles with his family, like with his parents and his siblings and cousins. He consulted some Christian pastors who convinced him that his family was trying to harm him and like get him out of the picture through witchcraft.
That doesn't sound very Christian.
No. So Tawo and a group of aggressors went out, assaulted and killed his mother and other alleged witches with machetes, clubs, and set them on fire.
Oh.
3 people died as a result of injuries. The police did not intervene, and the Nigerian government has not condemned this and many other persecutions of this nature. This was May of 2020. Witch hunting still thrives in many parts of Africa despite these laws being taken into effect. It continues to divide countries that were once implicated in the slave trade in West Africa, but it kind of reached a peak in the 1980s, 1990s. In 2014 and 2015, accused witches in the Central African Republic were publicly tortured and burned alive. Sometimes, however, this kind of thing happens when people come out and accuse themselves of killing dozens of people, and the torture and burning of these witches are supposed to be more like acts of criminal punishment or justice, right?
Yeah.
Even though witchcraft is already punishable by the law and involves like prison and a fine, these people wanted to seek justice themselves, like Batman. Except Batman doesn't kill.
Yeah. It's like imprisonment isn't good enough.
In April of 2008, in Kinshasa, which is in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, 13 people, you're going to love this, were arrested after being accused of stealing, via supernatural means, were accused of stealing or shrinking men's penises.
This came up a lot in the European research. Like, one of the biggest fears was that women would essentially magically castrate men.
Yes. Like removal of manhood.
Yes.
It's called penis snatching. There's a freaking Wikipedia article, bro.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Penis snatching. Let's do it.
Specifically in Western Africa, these accusations are not uncommon.
Oh my god.
At all.
I mean, not that I want to see a bunch of men's penises, but I'd just be like, you gotta prove it, man. I can't take your word for this. Like, Pixar didn't happen. I don't know.
I know when I was reading about this in the article, and it was like a legit article, someone was talking about how tiny their wiener was now. And like the interviewer got to look at it.
Oh my god.
And was like, yes, it is significantly small. And it's like, what are we talking about anymore?
But like, they didn't have it before, so
how would they know?
Homie's just insecure about having a tiny dick, micro penis.
This is a scapegoat.
And needs to blame someone.
It truly is. Yes. So these supposed sorcerers reportedly touched the people to make their penis shrink or disappear in an attempt to extort cash with the promise of a cure. Apparently, the same thing happened in Ghana some years prior, and the dozen suspected penis snatchers were actually beaten to death by an angry mob.
Oh my god.
12 people were killed by an angry mob.
I'm uncomfortable.
Majority
laughing.
Women.
I'm laughing from anxiety.
So as we just discussed in the previous episode, women are the most often accused, attacked, tortured, killed, you name it, blamed. Blah. Dr. Sylvia Federici, in a 2008 article posted in the Journal of International Women's Studies, said, "These witch hunts must be understood in the context of the deep crisis in the process of social reproduction that the liberalization and globalization of African economies have produced, as they have undermined local economies, devalued women's social position, and generated intense conflicts between young and old, women and men, over the use of crucial economic resources, starting with land." So she believes that the intensification of witch hunting women mostly comes from globalization, colonization, and introducing a land-sharing economy.
I mean, it makes sense.
Capitalism. We're come full circle.
I'm so stressed out. Okay.
Women in Ghana who had been accused of witchcraft for the past century, or I think more than a century, as recently as 2022, were sent to witch camps.
I've heard about the witch camps.
Though many were shut down in like the mid 2010s. They consist of women whose husbands had died, women who were not submissive, outspoken women, women who do not conform to society's expectations or the status quo, and more. They originated a century ago as a way to isolate women for their safety, actually. But now they've just become a marginal society of their own.
And some of these witch camps, don't they? They talked about this in the book club book, but I only skimmed this chapter because I didn't actually finish reading the book. But don't government officials then go to the witch camps and ask them to perform magic for their own agendas?
Yes, they do. So while they're both pushing these people to the edges of society, like literally physically confining them, they're also like, yes, we can use you. Because I have the power and I can kill you if I want.
It's just another form of enslavement.
Yes. The living standards at these camps are not good at all. There's like no running water. Nothing.
No.
Has to be shipped in.
And it's another form of hypocrisy that's just like being a witch is bad, but also we're going to use your magic to benefit ourselves.
What's really sad is that in the past, like when things were really bad in the 80s and 90s, feminist groups were not speaking up against witch hunting. Maybe from a fear of being associated with like the colonial stereotypes of Africans that have been like forced upon them. Or maybe they were afraid of being accused too. I don't know. I couldn't find any information about that. They're obviously more outspoken about it in recent years, especially following the Me Too movement. And just generally, apparently, like decreasing Christian values across the globe, but also in Ghana. So it's often in these situations young, unemployed men who accuse women of witchcraft, and then they're the ones who go about the torture and executions as well. The real root of witch hunts in these situations comes from a real struggle for survival and an adaptation to survive, whether it be to protect a cultural practice, prevent decreased population, or it really is just like a dark and cloudy, crappy perception of women that's affecting them. Thinking that women will destroy their chances of survival. I don't know.
I'm sorry, you need women to survive. Sorry.
But some of these men also accuse women because they have red eyes. They've acquired wealth. They've become independent. The women are jealous. The women might hurt them. The women can cook.
Oh my God.
And more ridiculous things.
The women might hurt me.
And I just want to end with it'll be a cold day in hell when people do not accuse, torture, and kill women for the stupidest reasons, let alone for practicing magic.
More on that in our next episode.
Yay. And that was the barest of the bear.
I know.
A lot of my sources get way like into it.
I know. Well, tune in next week to hear more upsetting things.
Be sad with us.
It's next week for you guys. It's in 2 minutes for us.
Well, that concludes this week's broadcast. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you wish to stay in touch, reach out to us at broadcastfromthebelfry@gmail.com or stalk us on Instagram at broadcastfromthebelfry. Again, I hope you've enjoyed our little show. Please rate and review. And until next week, stay